Outboard motorbike fuel tank time. The time has come. There's our frame mocked up together. Carby poking out through the top of the frame. They're the original Suzuki fuel tank mounts at the front, and it used to sit on that little rubber pad at the back and bolt on here. Obviously now we're a bit long, but fortunately it was a nice easy start. We can run pretty much a straight line through there as the base of the tank and then drop it down over the sides. So that's where we'll kick off, with the inside of the tank. And that little piece, that's the beginning of the hole that will go through the tank for the carbies to breathe. Stay tuned. Whacking great lump of aluminium, 850 by 850 basically, gets folded up to make the underside of the tank, as we shall see. And now that it's that shape, here we have possibly the world's, the start of, possibly the world's longest motorbike fuel tank. Here's a little tip for fabricators. I want to cut a dart out of here, which is a horrible job with a pair of snips because it fights you all the way. Tip for fabricators, use 2 pairs of snips. That way the offcut gets ejected at the same time from both sides. Keep going like so. Progress report. I've lowered the back of the tank there, the underside of the tank, and cut the hole in for the carby, but the carby hole doesn't need to go in yet. But I just want to see what it looked like. Here's the inside of our tank with the 2 wooden formers ready to be getting on with. And it would be possible to make a lot of wooden formers and define the shape a bit more accurately in advance. But in some ways it's easier to just have a minimum restraints and let the metal find its own way, because you end up with a nice sort of organic shape that way, and it's easier to make it fit. The starting point is the lid, which is this chunk of 5005 aluminium, half hard. Half hard means it's been work hardened a bit, so it's half hard. If I was going to make something really shapely out of it, you'd anneal it, but that makes it go all buckled and horrible, and you've got to start again. So I'll see how far we get with it before knocking the edges down, or something might need a bit of local annealing. Doesn't look like it's going to fit, but we'll see what we can do. I don't suppose a video of making the fuel tank will be complete without something going through the English wheel. There you go, it begins. And there's our piece of aluminium after literally 2 minutes in the English wheel. And a nice curve that way, and a little bit of crown that way to fit the templates, and it's almost done it by itself. The next thing I want to do is roll the edges down. But when they roll down, they need to be shorter because of the curve here. So before I roll them down, I'll shrink them along the edge. Get a step ahead of the game. Here's our little shrinking machine, as seen previously on TV. And we don't want a heavy shrink along here, just enough to sort of allow for the fact that it's going to need to curve down a little bit. So just like that. And so on. Little progress report there. As you can see, I've rolled the front and the back down. Starting to look more sensible. That's worked out okay along the edge, and the shape's still in there quite satisfactorily. But there's no way that's going to go down without a fight, and rather than have a fight, I'll anneal that bit and that bit there as well, where it's got to be really tight, and then we can beat it into submission. For this exercise, we're back to our favourite tool, the oxy torch. And the annealing method is to get the flame a bit carbony and just blacken the area you want to anneal. And restore some oxygen to get a nice flame. When the aluminium is hot enough to burn the carbon off, it's annealed. That simple. There's our top skin pretty much done. It's screwed down onto the bulkheads with some little screws through holes which we'll weld up later to hold it all in place while we do the side skins. And in case I've made that look sort of relatively easy, that's pretty much a full day's work, going back over the same ground again and again till eventually it's good enough, you know, far from perfect, but like that we can carry on and do the side skins. Now the top skin's funny because it just sits in the air and only has to fit at the front and the back. The side skins have to fit around 4 edges, so they're a simple enough thing, but challenging all the same. Here's our fuel tank with one side formed up and screwed in place, ready to be tack welded on. So it looks like a 40 litre fuel tank from here, but as you know, it's all hollowed out inside. And it's big, but I think it suits the look of the bike because it's a big bike with a big engine. I've got both sides of the tank welded to the top of the tank now. As you can imagine, the second side was quicker and easier, and it's probably a slightly better result. Plenty of work still to do, but I think you can see where we're going with that. Just want to show you how lucky you can be here. That's the hole in the top of the tank, cut to the right size for the chimney. It's called a chimney now. And it drops in there like that. And lines up almost perfectly with the hole in the bottom of the tank. And if you look in there, there's a couple of trumpets. I might get some longer ones so they poke out of the tank, we'll see. So here's our fuel tank shell. Finished all the welding around the outside and welded up the holes that we used with the screws to hold it onto the buck. And I put a little radius around the hole as you would. Next thing to do is to make it all smooth, but first we need to sand that weld off because it's in the way, which is an outdoor job. But that's our shell as it stands. You can see it's welded inside now, so we can get rid of those outside welds without it all getting too thin and cracking. Here's our tank with the weld sanded off. But it's still pretty rough, ripply, and not smooth in the radius. Why we sort that out? So the dolly and a slapper. That dolly just happens to have about the right radius on it. And luckily this tank's got a hole in it so you can get in there really easily. And you hit things with a hammer, you make dents. If you want to make things flat, you hit them with a slapper. Like so. Over the top of the dolly. And the way to find out where it's high and where it's low, that's a body file. You run that over the surface and it shows you that's a low point, that's a high point, and keep working it with the dolly until it's all smooth. Hours and hours and hours. In case you didn't see it on the previous video, that's our little tool for turning up the edge of the flange here to make it nice little weld. Just a bit of flat bar with some hacksaw cuts in it. Start off slowly, little by little, long job, but you end up with a much nicer weld because it's a butt weld instead of being on a corner, which makes it stronger, and you don't need to dress it off. You end up with a nice radius on the corner of the tank rather than just a sharp edge. Here's the top of our tank, just about ready to weld onto the base. All the edges are all rolled up now and ready to rumble. A huge amount of fitting and fiddling to get it to that stage, but it's about right. Final couple of things before we weld it on. There's a hole there for this natty little filler cap to go on. So you want to put that on before we weld the top on so we can clean out all the swarf from inside the tank before it's inside the tank. And somewhere on the base I need to put a little boss for this thing, fuel. That's fuel in, this is the fuel out. In case you haven't seen one before, motorbike fuel tap. It's got a reserve and a main supply. The main supply comes from here. When the fuel gets down to there, you switch it over and it takes fuel out from down here. That's all it is, just two different levels. Cheapy. So a little boss welded on for that, and we're there. Okay, it's time to commit here. That's the inside of the tank. That's the outside of the tank. And after much fitting and fiddling and filing and what have you, folding, it pretty much fits everywhere, around there and along the edges and front and back, if you hold it in just the right place. So it's time to weld them together. Starting with a tack there and a tack there, trying to keep everything cool and going slowly, and a tack there and a tack there, and the two ends, and slowly work my way forwards and backwards. It'll be an awkward job, but just got to go steady and we'll get there. And there we have it. A few hours work, but it all went pretty well along the edges and back and front. The most traumatic bit was trying to get that to fit, but welding a pipe into the middle of a flat plate's always going to be a trauma. But I've actually redressed the welds and welded it again there to get it nice and smooth, and it's come out alright. That's it, mate. A few brackets to mount it on the bike, and I'll close that in a little bit just to make it look a bit more elegant, and we're done. One fuel tank.